In the previous video, Goldgrind and his alt, Gringodld, managed to farm nearly 100k gold, sell it on the Warmane trade for 23 coins through 2 separate trades, and secure Goldgrind's second BIS item, Sharpened Twilight Scale. If you missed the details, make sure to check the previous episode. Before we start with this one, there are a few things that happened just before the Warmane gold squish. Gringodld continued generating gold at a very steady pace. To prepare for the squish and minimize losses, he invested heavily into resilient parchment. The vendor price would remain the same after the squish, making it a safe way to store value. Even with that preparation, gold was coming in incredibly fast. At one point, the only reasonable upgrade left was purchasing dual talent specialization, even though he didn't actually need it. Everything else was sent to Goldgrind with one clear goal: spend it wisely before the 50% tax hit. That period on Warmane was actually perfect timing to create a guild bank and unlock all 6 guild types. I offered 100 gold to each person who signed the guild charter. Some viewers even refused the gold and helped me for free, which I truly appreciate. Eventually, the guild was formed, the tabard was designed with a gold-themed logo, and all 6 guild tabs were purchased. This makes sharing materials across alts significantly easier and more organized. In total, around 15,000 gold was invested into the guild setup. The remaining gold was left intentionally, accounting for the incoming 50% Warmane tax, with a small portion kept on Gringodld to kick off the work in this episode. After the gold squish happened, Gringodld completed his 4th alchemy research and unlocked Potion of Wild Magic. Still no luck with Potion of Speed. That one continues to avoid us. In this episode of the Goldgrind series, the main priority remains Gringodld, at least for now. The plan is simple. Once he reinvests his gold into auction house inventory and stabilizes the operation, I can focus on leveling and preparing a second alt. However, after the last video, Inscription became extremely popular. Almost every single item Gringodld sold in the previous episode had to be reposted multiple times before it finally sold. And the prices didn't just drop by 50% after the squish. In many cases, they dropped closer to 70%. The last episode performed really well, and if even 1% of viewers decide to try Inscription themselves, the competition instantly become much harder. While Gringodld was fighting the market and grinding out profit the hard way, you guys voted and decided that the second alt could be also a Death Knight. So it was time to create another one. This time Adranei Death Knight. I'll explain the reason later, but from the name alone you can probably guess where this is going. A little over an hour in the DK starting zone resulted in another level 64 Death Knight standing in Stormwind. Before heading to Outland, he received a quick 5000 gold transfer from Gringodld, just enough to unlock flying and help with the professions later on. The first thing to do was pick up flying at Honor Hold. After that, it was time once again to complete the well-known questlines in Hellfire Peninsula. This time, however, leveling was noticeably harder than it was with Gringo. This zone was full of Horde players, many of them rogues, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Usually right after Ringo pulled a group of mobs just to gain as much advantage as possible. A bit of toxic PvP behavior, but that's simply how it goes sometimes. That said, a few of those encounters ended with some well-deserved karma for them. so it balanced out in the end. Warmane Icecrown is a PvP server after all, so nothing to complain about. Just like with Gringo, it took a little under 3 hours of total playtime to reach level 68. Before we continue with the new alt Ringo, let me introduce you to the Operation MEG, which stands for Milling equals Gold. Here's a simple example. Gringo starts with a little over 11,000 gold and spends all of it on cheap herbs. Usually anything priced below 2 gold and 50 silver per herb. The guild bank is used to store larger amounts of materials and keep the inventory organized. Those herbs are then milled into pigments, which are turned into snowfall ink and ink of the sea. Snowfall ink is mostly used for Scroll of Fortitude, a stamina buff that's popular for both PvE and PvP, and also for crafting epic offhands. Ink of the Sea, on the other hand, is used to create armor and weapon vellums, as well as Scrolls of Agility, Strength and Intellect. Scroll of Stamina used to be part of this operation, but it has lost too much value on the auction house, so it's no longer worth producing. Throughout this entire episode, Gringodld was basically running Operation MEG non-stop. Icethorn was also used to craft indestructible potions, but those have been selling slower lately and the prices have dropped quite a bit, so it's not something worth investing heavily into right now. On top of that, cheap Icethorn is becoming harder and harder to find on the auction house. At the end of the operation, the result is clear. 11k invested turns into roughly 17k worth of items listed on the auction house. Time to set up professions on the new alt. The first choice was Jewelcrafting, mainly because Ringo is Draenei, and that extra +5 Jewelcrafting skill always helps. Before even learning this profession, Ringo had to spend quite a bit of gold buying all the required materials. After a quick 10 gold portal to Dalaran, it was straight to the Jewelcrafting trainer. For leveling, I followed a guide made by Equi, another Warmane creator. It's a solid guide overall, but it still needs a bit of polishing. The material list isn't completely accurate. If you try it yourself, you'll probably notice that a few crafting materials are missing from the required list. None of the crafted items were sold to vendors or placed on the auction house. Instead, they were saved for the secondary profession, enchanting. All of them were stored in the guild bank, ready to be disenchanted later. After a little under 2 hours, Jewelcrafting was finally maxed out at skill 455. Some recipes take longer to craft and require large quantities of materials, so both buying everything at the start and completing the crafting process took some time. Any leftover materials, along with a few extra Jewelcrafting items, were listed on the auction house to recover some of the costs, bringing back about 1,500 gold. With only 500 gold left in the bag, it was time to start leveling enchanting. One of the most expensive professions in the game, if not the most expensive to max out. All the rings and necklaces crafted during the Jewelcrafting leveling process were disenchanted first, to make the early levels cheaper and easier. Everything else that was needed, rods, dusts, essences, and even a few pearls, had to be purchased from the auction house. In the meantime, some of the leftover Jewelcrafting materials managed to sell, which helped a little with the costs. But once enchanting reached around skill 300, the materials suddenly became extremely expensive, and the gold started disappearing very quickly. On top of that, Ringo had to travel back to Honor Hold to continue from skill 300 to 350, since the TBC enchant recipes can't be learned in Dalaran. At one point, all characters were sending whatever gold they had to Ringo, just to keep the process going and buy the rods needed to continue leveling. Gringodld even crafted vellums, allowing those enchants to be listed on the auction house later and recover some of the investment. By the end of this exhausting and very expensive leveling process, all characters combined had only 200 gold left. And that was a serious problem, because both alts depend heavily on having gold available to buy materials, craft items, and keep their gold making cycle running. So Goldgrind stepped in to help a little. A quick farming test run was in order. 45 minutes of herbalism and mining across Storm Peaks, Icecrown and Sholazar Basin, followed by exactly 1 hour of fishing in Wintergrasp, just to see how much gold it could generate both methods after Gold-squish. In total it came out a little over 2000 gold. That breaks down to roughly 1000 gold per 45 minutes of gathering herbs and ores, and about a bit more than 1000 gold per hour of fishing. Not the most impressive numbers, but any gold helps when your alts are starting almost from scratch. Once Goldgrind provided that small boost of gold, both alts were able to get back to work. Gringodld was performing much better overall. Operation MEG might have been slow, but the profit was clearly visible after every milling cycle. On the other hand, Ringo wasn't having nearly as much success. He was still missing many important recipes from the Dalaran vendors, so any small amount of gold he managed to earn had to be reinvested immediately into more materials for crafting enchants. On top of that, every enchant he posted on the auction house was getting undercut in less than 5 minutes. The competition was simply brutal, with many players trying the same exact strategy. Ringo also tried the Saronite Ore Shuffle, prospecting ores into gems. Let's just say the result was basically breaking even. The same thing happened with crafting Jewelcrafting rings and disenchanting them into enchanting materials. The costs of Saronite and Eternal Earth, the core materials for these shuffles, were simply too high to generate any meaningful profit. But that's pretty normal after a Gold-squish. Everyone is trying to rebuild their gold reserves, and when that happens, the competition on the auction house becomes much tougher. To speed things up for this episode, Goldgrind had to put in some serious work. Over the course of 3 separate days, he spent more than 7 hours farming herbs and ores, filling almost his entire inventory at the end. It was a lot of effort, but it had to be done to push the episode forward. On top of that, there were plenty of PvP encounters, slowing things down, and of course, the usual problem with bots. So many of them flying around, grabbing herbs before anyone else could even react. At the end, you can see the total value of all the materials collected, except for the 2 most farmed ones, Saronite Ore and Adder's Tongue. Once those were added to the calculation, it became clear that more than half of the total value came from just those 2 materials alone. And yes, everything sold within 12 hours without any major issues. Only a small portion of herbs which didn't sell was sent to Gringodld to keep Operation MEG running. This episode was recorded over the course of more than 2 weeks. Some days involved serious time invested into gold making, while others were simply log in, repost auctions and log out. I know the episodes sometimes come out a bit slower, but there's only so much I can do. I can't force people to buy my items from the auction house. Sales like this simply take time. To wrap up this video, let's take a quick look at the gold making statistics for this episode. In last place we have Ringo. He experimented with multiple methods, and many of them turned out not to be very profitable. Still, by the end, he managed to accumulate around 7,000 gold. If he had focused on just one solid method, the result would probably have been better. But the goal here is always to show both the good and the bad sides of gold making. The top 2 spots go to Gringo and Goldgrind. Operation MEG continued to perform well for Gringo. The only downside is that selling inscription items can be fairly slow. Unfortunately, there's not much you can do about that besides reposting auctions until they eventually sell. Goldgrind, on the other hand, spent hours farming herbs and ores. It might not be the best exciting content, but it definitely helps speed up the progress toward the third BIS item by at least 2 or 3 days. While Ringo and Gringo had their auction listed, Goldgrind was out there actively farming, keeping the gold flowing. And to secure another 23 coins for the third BIS item, the offhand weapon which you decided, 2 separate trades were posted on Warmane trade. A lot less gold than in previous episode, right? Both of them sold within 1 hour. The last step was simple: purchase the item from the store, and with that, episode 10 is officially complete. Before ending the video, I want to give another big thanks to Manoka for the coffee support. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like, drop a comment below, and consider subscribing to the channel. Voting for the 4th BIS item is already open on Discord, so don't forget to cast your vote. You can also support the channel in several ways: through Patreon, YouTube membership, or by sending a coffee. Everything is completely optional, of course, but it really helps support this series. I'm really excited for the next part of this journey. Until then, see you again in the next episode.